By the time my sister raised her plastic cup at the family picnic, I already knew she had been waiting all afternoon to humiliate me. You know exactly the kind of moment I'm talking about. Everyone smiling too wide. Everyone chewing too slowly. Everyone feeling that something ugly is coming but nobody saying a word because they'd rather watch the spectacle than protect the peace. That was the atmosphere hanging over the folding tables by the lake that afternoon. The burgers were still smoking on the grill. The kids were running barefoot through the wet grass. And my family was pretending to be the kind of people who only get together to laugh. Then my sister Vanessa stood up, tapped her cup with a fork, and smiled that smile of hers, bright and polished, sweet from a distance, always cruel up close. A toast, she said, to the one who always shows up broke, needy, and still somehow hoping to matter to someone. My mother laughed first. My father looked down at his plate and smiled at it. A few cousins followed, because that is what weak people do when cruelty arrives wearing the face of confidence. I picked up my cup. I stood up slowly. I looked her directly in the eyes. Then let's toast properly, I said. To the one who borrows from the same person she ridicules, denies it in front of the family, and still expects applause. The entire yard went quiet. Her smile disappeared. My father finally raised his eyes. My mother went pale. And my sister, for the first time in her life, looked scared instead of superior. I am Mara Bennett. I am 34 years old. I restore damaged documents for the State Museum during the day and work evenings at a framing shop to keep my own life stable. I drive a 12-year-old car. I wear simple clothes. I do not perform wealth for strangers. After almost letting the wrong man ruin my financial future, I chose security over spectacle. My family called that failure. My sister called it poverty. I called it learning. When you spend your days preserving evidence, you stop treating memory as truth just because it sounds emotional. You learn to keep records. You learn that the difference between a story and a document is that one can be rewritten and one cannot. I had been keeping records for 4 years. Vanessa recovered quickly because recovery was one of her talents. She could trip in public and make it look like the floor had offended her. She let out a short laugh, touched the rim of her sunglasses, and said, "Wow, Mara, are we really doing this at a family picnic?" The tone was soft. The message was clear. I was the problem for responding. She was not the problem for starting it. That had been the family pattern for years. She cut. I bled. And then everyone asked why I was making such a mess. "You started it," I said. Don't act surprised because I finally answered. My mother, Carol, leaned forward with that halting voice she used whenever she wanted to smooth things over, without actually correcting anyone. "Girls, not here, not now, not in front of everyone." That had always been the rule when Vanessa crossed a line. The problem was never the wound. The problem was always that someone might see it. Vanessa shrugged like she was getting bored. I was joking. "You always do this. You turn everything into a drama because you're insecure." Some cousins looked away. Others watched with the particular fascination people usually reserve for car accidents. I set my cup down before I squeezed it hard enough to crush it. "A joke," I said. "You borrowed $3,000 from me in February because your commission was late. $900 in April for your car. $1,500 in June because your rent on the downtown apartment was due, and you didn't want your boyfriend to know you were behind. $800 in August for the bachelorette trip you said you couldn't miss because what people thought was too important." Which part was the joke? Her face changed first at the edges. That was the thing about Vanessa. She had trained her mouth better than her eyes. Her smile held for one more second, but the panic had already surfaced. "You didn't have to say the numbers," she said. "Exactly. And you didn't have to make a toast about me like I was the family charity case." A low murmur moved along the tables. My uncle stopped turning the corn on the grill. One of my younger cousins was looking at Vanessa the way children look when adults accidentally reveal they aren't perfect. My friend Lena from work, who had come because she thought a lakeside picnic sounded peaceful, was standing near the cooler with a paper plate in her hand, watching me with the expression of someone who had just understood 3 years of conversations I had never fully finished explaining. Vanessa crossed her arms. "So, You want a medal because you helped your sister a couple of times? No, I said. I wanted basic respect. That would have cost you considerably less. That landed harder than I expected. Even my father Ricardo shifted in his chair. He had spent years confusing my silence with strength. Because I resolved things quietly, he assumed I needed nothing. Because Vanessa complained loudly, he assumed she needed more. That is how some families distribute love, not by fairness, but by who generates the most noise. Vanessa stepped closer. Her voice dropped to something sharper. Tell them the rest, Mara. Tell them how you act like you're better than everyone because you have your sad little jobs and your saving spreadsheets and your secondhand clothes. You want everyone here to think you're some kind of saint?
Fine.
Tell them how impossible you are. Tell them how you judge everyone. I laughed once, because that was almost admirable. She had taken her financial dependence on me and repackaged it as my arrogance. I had been supporting her, and she had found a way to make that evidence of my insufficiency. I restore damaged documents for the State Museum during the day, I said. And I work evenings at a framing shop to keep my own life stable. I don't spend my salary on things I can't afford. I don't rent luxury I can't sustain. I don't insult the people who cover me. A silence fell over the yard again. But this one felt different. Not empty. Heavy. The kind that arrives when an entire room realizes it has been listening to the wrong person for years. Vanessa looked toward my parents, waiting to be rescued. That was when I knew she had more fear than fury in her. People who feel powerful attack. People who feel exposed search for backup. My mother tried first. Mara, sweetheart, that's enough. But her voice had lost its authority. She sounded less like a mother, and more like someone praying that a fire would put itself out. My father cleared his throat. This doesn't have to become a spectacle.
I turned to him.
Then why was everyone so comfortable when I was the spectacle 5 minutes ago? He had no answer. He looked at the lake the way people look at things when they need an exit that isn't there. Vanessa saw his hesitation and turned reckless. You're unbelievable. After everything this family has done for you, you're standing here playing the victim. That almost made me laugh again, not because it was funny, but because it was so breathtakingly bold. What exactly has this family done for me, Vanessa? Say it clearly. She opened her mouth, closed it. She was good at tone, at implication, at insult, at performance. She was much weaker with facts. My Aunt Diana, who had always adored Vanessa's polished surface and expensive hair, chimed in from the other end of the table. Your parents have always included you, Mara. They've supported you both equally. Equally, I said. How interesting. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small accordion folder I had started carrying everywhere because I had stopped trusting my family's version of our shared history. Some people keep a journal to heal. I kept records.
The museum had taught me that.
When you spend your days preserving evidence, you stop letting memory masquerade as fact just because it sounds emotional. Mara, my mother said, her voice sharp when she saw the folder.
Don't.
No, I said. Today we do this properly. I opened the folder and laid several items on the table beside the potato salad. Printed bank transfer confirmations, screenshots of text messages, and a handwritten note Vanessa had once left in my mailbox asking me not to tell anyone she had run short on rent again. I did not wave them dramatically. I did not shout. That would have given everyone permission to dismiss me as emotional. I simply placed the papers on the table the way you place receipts for a meal nobody wants to pay for. February 12th, $3,000. Transfer note. Temporary, don't tell mom and dad. April 4th, $920 for your car repair. June 21st, $1,500 because Liam thought you'd already paid your share of rent. August 2nd, $800 for the bachelorette trip you swore you couldn't miss because your image mattered too much. Vanessa went white, not pale.
White.
One of my cousins said, "Oh my God," loud enough for half the table to hear. My Aunt Diana stopped talking. My father stared at the papers like they were written in a language he had been hoping he would never have to learn. You kept the receipts, Vanessa said. Of course I did, I said. You taught me to. That was the first genuinely honest sentence of the evening. I had not started my 20s distrusting everyone. I had become careful after too many stories that changed when she retold them to other people. After too many favors that became proof of her generosity because she had allowed me to help her. After too many humiliations dressed up as jokes. Lena moved silently from the cooler to stand closer to me. She didn't touch me or interrupt anything. She just stood there. Somehow that was more powerful than any speech anyone could have made. Vanessa looked at my parents again. Are you going to let her do this?
My father rubbed his jaw.
You asked for that money. She hesitated. That was all anyone needed to hear. It was private, she finally said. It was private when I was protecting you, I said. You made it public when you used me as the punchline of a toast. A low sound moved through the tables. My uncle stopped rearranging things on the grill. Several people looked away. Lena stayed beside me without saying anything, and that was enough. Then Vanessa reached for a different weapon entirely. She stepped closer and looked at me with an expression she had been sharpening for exactly this purpose. Maybe if you weren't so bitter about being alone, you wouldn't be so obsessed with money. The cruelty in that sentence was deliberate. She knew precisely where to aim. 2 years earlier, I had ended an engagement after discovering my ex-boyfriend had secretly opened a credit card in both our names and expected me to absorb the debt because I was better at managing finances. My sister knew how painful that period had been. She knew I had spent months rebuilding both my finances and my trust in other people. And she used it anyway. In the middle of a family picnic, between the paper plates and the lemonade, she picked up my deepest wound and swung it. I looked at her for a long moment. Keep going, I said. She lifted her chin, mistaking calm for weakness. No, really, tell everyone how miserable you are. Tell them why you can't stand seeing people happy. Happy, I repeated. Vanessa, you're not happy. You're expensive. Those are different things. The yard went still again. My uncle coughed into his fist to cover what was clearly a laugh. One cousin simply could not contain himself. Vanessa heard that, and the humiliation finally broke through her polish.
She's jealous.
Resentful. Small. Finish that sentence, I said, and I'll read aloud the message where you called me crying from outside a hotel because your card was declined and you texted me. Please pick up. You're the only one who always fixes this. She stopped. For the first time in my adult life, my sister had reached the edge of what performance could save her from. She stood there in the middle of the yard with nowhere left to go, and something shifted in the air around us like a current that had changed direction. I reached into the folder one more time and held up a single sheet. The total outstanding, including the money you promised to return last year, is $2,800. My mother made a soft sound. My father looked at Vanessa with a quality of disappointment I had never before seen directed at her. She saw it too, and it shook her more than anything I had said, because the one protection she had always counted on, our parents' reflexive defense, was visibly, quietly withdrawing. I was going to pay it back, she said. When? I asked. After the next brunch? After the next salon appointment? After you renew the apartment lease you can't afford. Mara, my mother said, but there was no conviction in it. Just fear. Then Vanessa's boyfriend Liam, who had been helping at the grill and carefully avoiding the center of the drama like a man trying not to step on a mine, finally walked over. Hold on, he said slowly. You told me your bonus covered the rent that was late. Vanessa turned toward him, so fast, I thought something would break. This isn't the time. Actually, he said, it seems like exactly the time. That changed the shape of everything. Until that moment, Vanessa had still been fighting from an elevated position. But now someone from her own carefully controlled life had just discovered he was standing on a cardboard stage. Did you lie to me? He asked. Don't do this here, she whispered. You told me Mara was always asking you for help, he said quietly. You told me she was irresponsible. Vanessa opened her mouth. There was nothing left to say that was going to sound credible. I watched the realization cross his face slowly, not fury, but something worse. Embarrassment at having been made a spectator in his own relationship. I'm going for a walk, he said, and left without waiting for an answer. That was the second real consequence of the evening. The first was exposure. The second was loss. and this one she hadn't planned for. I collected the papers back into a neat stack. "Tonight I'm sending you a payment plan," I said to Vanessa. "If you ignore it, I'll consider that money the price of a lesson, and I will never answer an emergency call from you again." She looked at me. "You would cut off your own sister?" "I would stop financing my own humiliation," I said. Then I turned to my parents. "And, before either of you asks me to be the bigger person, don't. I have been the bigger person so long that everyone mistook it for my permanent shape." Nobody spoke. The breeze off the lake moved the edges of the tablecloth. A paper napkin lifted and fell. Somewhere behind us, one of the small children asked if dessert was ready yet, which was almost absurdly normal. That's how family ruptures happen. The world doesn't stop. It just reveals itself. People began leaving early after that, something that on any other holiday would have deeply offended my mother, but that afternoon she barely noticed. A picnic built on appearances cannot survive the truth for very long. As relatives folded chairs and carried coolers to their cars, I caught fragments of the story spreading in low voices. "Had no idea. $6,000. Called her worthless. Incredible." It wasn't that everyone suddenly took my side.
Real life is slower than that.
Some still believed I had gone too far. Some still held to the old family religion that public peace matters more than private justice. But the spell had broken, and when a family spell breaks, it rarely reassembles into the same shape. Vanessa tried twice to find sympathy, first with my aunt, then with Liam when he returned. Neither conversation lasted long. My Aunt Diana, who had spent years praising Vanessa's taste and charm, finally said the only useful thing I had ever heard from her: "I can't offend you tonight." Liam didn't shout. He looked worse than an angry man. He looked like someone ashamed of having been converted into a spectator of his own relationship. He handed the grill tongs to my father, said he was going for a drive, and did not come back for nearly 40 minutes. When he did, he stood a little apart from Vanessa, as though proximity had become a decision rather than a habit. The yard emptied slowly. My parents waited near the patio in the particular quality of silence that means the second part of the night has arrived. Not the public part. The honest one. Vanessa was sitting in a chair under the string lights with her arms wrapped around herself. She no longer looked glamorous. She looked cornered. Good, I thought, and then hated the thought for half a second before accepting it. Consequences always look cruel to people who never expected any. "Mara," my father said. "Come sit." I pulled out a chair and faced them. Lena squeezed my shoulder once before heading to her car, giving me the kind of exit that people offer when they know the next conversation belongs to blood and history and accumulated damage. My mother folded and unfolded a paper napkin in her lap. "You caught us off guard," she said. That was so typical of a mother that I almost felt something close to tenderness. "I've been giving signals for years," I said. "You just didn't want to read them." My father looked at Vanessa. "Go inside." She looked at him steadily. "Why am I the only one being treated like I did something wrong?" He didn't raise his voice. "Because tonight, you did something wrong." Small words. Late in coming. But it was the first time I had heard him say something like that to her without wrapping it in 12 layers of explanation. Vanessa stood so abruptly, her chair scraped the patio. She looked to my mother for rescue, found none, and went inside, pulling the screen door hard enough to make the frame vibrate. The sound hung in the air. My mother flinched. I didn't. When the yard settled again, my father leaned forward with his forearms on his knees. "How long has this been happening?" "Depends on which part," I said. "The money about 4 years. The insults longer. The expectation that I'll absorb everything she generates, most of my adult life." My mother's eyes filled. "Why didn't you tell us?"
"I did," I said.
"Just not in ways you chose to hear." I said I was exhausted. I said I couldn't keep going like this. I said her comments were cruel. Every time you told me she was stressed or sensitive or that she didn't mean it or that I was stronger and should let it go. I paused. "You didn't listen because the role you gave me was useful." That landed where it needed to land. My parents loved me. I believed that, had always believed it. But they loved me lazily. They loved the version of me that resolved things, absorbed things, forgave things, remembered birthdays, brought side dishes to gatherings, answered late-night calls, and never once demanded that the family's emotional economy be audited. Once I stopped being that version, they were forced to meet the actual daughter they had in front of them. And she was tired. My mother spoke quietly. We thought Vanessa needed more support. She was always more difficult. That isn't the compliment you think it is, I said. It just means you taught her that difficulty gets rewarded. My father closed his eyes for a moment. She always needed more attention, and you were easier to manage. So you managed me, I said, by giving me less. Neither of them denied it. That was the first honest gift of the night. There are moments in family arguments when people can still escape into denial. This was no longer one of them. My mother looked at me with that raw, unprotected expression parents sometimes have when they realize their children saw more than they intended to show.
We were proud of you, she said.
You were stable, capable. You never seemed to need rescuing. I didn't need rescuing, I said. I needed fairness. I needed someone to notice that being reliable is not the same thing as being without feelings. My father exhaled slowly. Did Vanessa return any of the money? Partial payments. Enough to keep the story alive. Never enough to change it. I told them more than I had planned to. The phone call from outside the hotel. 40 minutes I had driven in the middle of the night, sat in my car while she reapplied her lipstick in my mirror, listened to her promise it was the last time, and 2 days later watched her post photos from that same dinner with the caption, "Blessed beyond what I deserve." The rent she had hidden from Liam. The utilities notice she cried over in my kitchen on a Tuesday, then the salon photos that appeared Thursday with a caption about self-care. My mother covered her mouth. My father looked like he aged by the minute. Do you know what hurt most? I asked. Not the money. Not even the insults. It was hearing you laugh this afternoon before you knew I was going to answer. Realizing that at some point along the way I had become someone it was acceptable to disrespect. My mother began to cry then. Not the wounded tears of a parent who feels accused. The tears that come when the image you have of yourself cracks, and there is no one to blame for the sound it makes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. My father's voice was rough. I should have stopped that toast the moment it started. Yes, I said. You should have. Some people would call that unnecessary harshness. I call it precision. Precision is not cruelty just because it refuses to soften itself. My father nodded once, accepting it. You're right. Those 2 words. Simple, but they changed the air. My entire life, peace in our family had depended on me swallowing the truth faster than other people created problems. Hearing my father say I was right, without rushing to excuse Vanessa, without pivoting to her feelings, felt almost disorienting. My mother wiped her face. What do you need from us now? That was the best question of the night, because it was the first one that put my reality at the center instead of their discomfort. I answered slowly. First, stop asking me to answer their calls, lend money, smooth things over, or explain Vanessa to herself. Second, don't ask me to forgive quickly just because the house feels tense. Third, if she insults me in front of you again, address it in the moment, not afterward. And fourth, don't confuse access to me with entitlement to me. My mother nodded through tears. My father nodded too. Is it fair? He asked. It's necessary, I corrected. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. Do you want us to make her pay the money back? I thought about it. Not because I doubted the answer, but because I wanted to be honest about what the money actually meant. Yes, I said. Not because I need every dollar to survive. I need the debt acknowledged because the lie has been expensive in more than one way. My father straightened in his chair. Then, that's what's going to happen. She's going to pay you back. We'll help her make a plan, but we are not paying it for her. My mother nodded. No more rescues. There was a long silence after that. But it wasn't the silence from before. Not the kind stuffed with evasion. This one had work inside it. Finally, my mother said, I think we fell into the habit of admiring Vanessa's shine and leaning on your structure. I looked at her. That is the most honest sentence you've said all year. She almost laughed. Then didn't. My father did, but bitterly. And structure doesn't shine, so we took it for granted. Exactly. Vanessa came back outside 20 minutes later. Her mascara had run. The rage had been rearranged into wounded pride. Liam was with her, but standing a little apart, as though closeness had become a choice instead of a reflex. My parents looked at her differently now. That was the quiet miracle of the night. Not that they had suddenly stopped loving her. Parents rarely stop loving. The miracle was that the love had finally stopped blinding them. "Sit down," my father said.
She did.
No performance, no dramatic sigh. Just a stiff, tense drop into the patio chair across from us. My mother spoke first. "You owe Mara an apology." Vanessa made a short laugh with no humor in it. "So this is a tribunal now?" "No," I said. "It's the first normal conversation this family has had about your behavior in years." She looked at me with naked resentment, fury and shame, and the stubbornness of someone being forced to meet themselves without flattering lighting. "You humiliated me," she said. "You put me on display in front of 30 people." "Like a joke," my father said, and all four of us turned because he almost never interrupted her. "That wasn't a joke. That was cruelty, and you knew exactly what you were doing." Vanessa stared at him like he had switched languages mid-sentence. My mother added, quietly and with precision, "And the money is not a misunderstanding. It's a debt." I watched that word land on her.
Debt.
Not a favor. Not support. Not something temporary between sisters.
Debt.
That single word stripped years of comfortable storytelling away from what she had done. She looked at Liam. He had nothing prepared for her. "You told Mara I had covered the rent," he said quietly. "You told your parents she was always asking you for help. You told me she was irresponsible." Silence. "Did you?" His voice didn't rise. It hardened. "Yes," she said, barely above a whisper. Nobody moved for a moment. Then my father said, "You're going to pay back every dollar. We'll help you make a plan. But we are not paying it." Her head snapped up. "You're going to make me struggle over this?" My mother's answer came before anyone else's.
"No.
"We're making you face what you created." I cannot fully describe how extraordinary that was to hear. My mother had spent most of our lives cushioning consequences before they could reach Vanessa. Hearing her stop, it sounded like a long-stuck door finally opening. Vanessa turned to me one last time.
"Fine.
"Keep your money if it matters so much." "It matters," I said, "not because I love money, but because I respect effort. Every dollar you treated like it meant nothing cost me time you never valued." She rolled her eyes, but with less force than before. "You always have to turn everything into a moral lesson." "Life did that," I said. "I'm just saying it out loud for the first time." Liam stood. "I'm going home." He looked at Vanessa. "I don't know what's worse, the debt, the lies, or the way you publicly destroyed the person who was covering you." He looked at my parents. "I'm sorry this happened here." Then he looked at me. "I'm sorry I believed her." He left without slamming anything, and somehow that made it more final. Vanessa watched him go, frozen by surprise. That was the second real consequence of the night. Exposure was the first. Loss was the second. And she had not prepared for it. She stood to follow him, then stopped. There was no dramatic exit left available to her. My father pointed at the chair. She sat back down, and for the first time in my life, she looked genuinely small, not innocent, but stripped of the arrogance that had always been her armor. "You're going to apologize properly," my mother said. Vanessa looked at me. Her eyes were wet with fury and shame in equal measure. She closed them. When she opened them, her voice was different. Lower, less polished. "I'm sorry for using you," she said. "I'm sorry for taking your help and then acting like I was above you. I'm sorry for lying to Liam." A pause. "I'm sorry for the toast." It wasn't complete. It wasn't enough to undo 4 years. But it was the first sentence she had said to me in a very long time that I believed was actually hers. The yard was empty by the time the last cousin drove away. Folding tables with pressed-down grass underneath them. Half a watermelon sweating on the table. A tray of dinner rolls gone stiff in the evening air. The lake going dark. I stood by the dock for a while as the sky turned that deep blue that makes everything look softer than it actually is. Lena had already gone. My parents were inside. The string lights flickered once. I thought about a night 16 months earlier, driving 40 minutes in the dark because Vanessa had called me crying from outside a boutique hotel after a birthday dinner, too embarrassed to ask Liam for money, too proud to admit she had spent the rent. I had sat in my car while she fixed her lipstick in my mirror and listened to her promise it was the last time. 2 days later, she posted photos from that same dinner with the caption, "Blessed beyond what I deserve." I had been the invisible beam, holding up the floor she danced on. I had not been broke. I had been carrying people. And the difference between those two things was the whole story. I picked up my bag. I collected the folder. I walked to my car without rushing. Humiliation inside families rarely arrives as one large event. It comes as years of small permissions. A cruel comment nobody corrects. A favor that never comes back around. One daughter praised for her shine while the others praised for her endurance, as though endurance isn't just love wearing practical shoes because nobody bought her anything nicer. Standing at that picnic with the receipts on the folding table and my sister finally, visibly shaking, I understood that I wasn't ending a fight. I was ending a role. And I had been playing it long enough to know every single line. Some people become the family's scapegoat quietly, over years, through 100 tiny surrenders they didn't realize they were making. I had made all of them. And then, on a Saturday afternoon by a lake with hamburgers on the grill and children running through wet grass, I quietly stopped. Not with screaming. Not with cruelty. With a folder of documents and a sentence she couldn't rewrite. The part about looking bad, you did yourself. I just stopped editing. That was the line I wished I had learned at 25 instead of 34. But I had it now, and I was keeping it.